by David K. Wright. Crash Project. The people who ran the Ford Motor Company were upset. The year was 1953, and Chevrolet had just introduced the Corvette, a two-seat sports car. Chevrolet was part of General Motors, Ford's big rival. Ford needed to make a sports car too. The company had always made fast cars, but now it had to make a fast car that also looked sporty. Corvettes had smooth curves, so Ford created a car with sharper edges. It was low and stylish, and it had only two seats, just like the Corvette. Ford called this new sports car the Thunderbird, after a mythical bird from a Native American legend. In the 1950s, Ford came out with a racy new car called the Thunderbird. This red Thunderbird is from 1955, the year the car was introduced. A powerful sports car. Ford began selling Thunderbirds in 1955. Right away, T-Birds got a lot of attention from people. They were just as pretty as Corvettes, and they came in more colors. One model had a top with a porthole on each side, with room for just two people and a powerful V8 engine under the hood. The Thunderbird was a true sports car. Ford and General Motors copied each other. Ford copied the idea of making a sports car, but General Motors copied the idea of using a V8 engine. Ford had been putting big V8 engines in his car long before the Thunderbird. The car was a mix of old and new ideas. When Thunderbirds came out, they were a big hit. These models are all two seats, convertibles from the 1950s, but they are each slightly different. Adding passengers. Two-seat Thunderbirds were very popular, but not everybody was satisfied with the car. Some buyers wanted a car that could carry more than two people and had more room in the trunk. After only 3 years, Ford stopped making the two-seat Thunderbird. The 1958 Thunderbird was a new, much larger car. It could carry 4 people, and it had room in its trunk for several suitcases. The car had fins, the back and razor sharp lines, but it was no longer a sports car. Thunderbirds now appealed more to older drivers and to people with families. By 1958, the Thunderbird had become larger, so it could carry more than 2 people. This 1959 Thunderbird convertible has long fins in the back. Powerful T-Birds. Thunderbirds were no longer small sports cars. The cars were still fast, however, and many people began to use them in stock car races. Race drivers knew that the engines in Ford Thunderbirds were big and powerful. They modified the Thunderbirds, turning them into race cars. These racing T-Birds only had one seat, and they also had a special roll cage that would protect the driver in case of an accident. The cars are much louder than normal Thunderbirds because their V8 engines did not have mufflers. The cars ran on big oval racetracks. Although they started out as regular T-Birds, they were much faster. This 1963 Thunderbird is for everyday driving, but it has a powerful engine. In the 1960s, some people turned T-Birds into racing cars. Longer and wider. In the 1960s, Thunderbirds kept growing. They were now large, luxurious cars. Customers could buy a convertible model, but they could also buy a four-door sedan. Ford made other cars that cost more, but people bought Thunderbirds because the cars looked expensive. and fast. By 1967, Ford no longer made a convertible model of the Thunderbird. The front of the car now looked like a jet plane. And it also had hidden headlights. When a driver turned them on, the lights popped out from behind little doors. A Thunderbird from the 1960s is a long, wide car. This 1965 T-Bird was used in the 1991 film, Thelma and Louise. The biggest Thunderbird. The 1976 Thunderbird was the biggest ever. It weighed over 4,500 pounds, or 2,040 kilograms. At the time, gasoline had become very expensive. Many people had stopped buying big cars because the cars used too much gasoline. They drove smaller cars that used less gas. In 1977, the Thunderbird shrank. The new car was a foot shorter than a 1976 model and weighed much less too. Ford soon offered this new, smaller car, only as two-door model. Besides being smaller, this new Thunderbird was very luxurious. Although this 1976 Thunderbird was a huge, heavy car, only two people could sit in it comfortably. The 1977 Thunderbird was a much smaller car. The aero look. In 1983, Ford introduced an exciting, all-new Thunderbird. It was a sleek and pretty two-door coupe. People said this new Thunderbird had an aero look because it had the smooth shape of an airplane. Ford offered the new model with the choice of 3 engines. Besides the larger V8, buyers could also choose a smaller V6. Buyers could also choose a 4-cylinder engine that came with a turbocharger. Turbochargers were often used on race cars. With this special engine, the new Thunderbird flew down the highway. In the 1980s, Ford made Thunderbirds that looked much different than earlier models. This 1986 Thunderbird has a turbocharger for extra power. A safer car. Ford made many improvements to the Thunderbird in the 1990s. The company added better brakes so the car would stop more quickly, and designed an engine that created less pollution. Thunderbirds also grew in size. Ford designed new suspension so the cars handled and rode very well. Although these Thunderbirds were very good cars, Ford had trouble selling them. Maybe they looked too much like other cars. The company stopped making Thunderbirds after 1997, and rumors began to spread. Was Ford planning to build an all-new Thunderbird? By the 1990s, Thunderbirds had come a long way from the early models. This red 1995 Thunderbird is parked next to a 1955 T-Bird. The Thunderbird Reborn. In 2001, Ford introduced a new Thunderbird. This new Thunderbird looked a lot like the first model that came out in the 1950s. It was a small two-seater, and it was available as a convertible. The new car even had a hardtop with portholes. The latest Thunderbird is a mix of the old and new. Beneath the surface, it has many modern innovations. On the outside, however, the car has much of the style of the classic Thunderbird from the 1950s. Like styles of clothing or music, car styles may go out of fashion, but they come back again. The T-Bird has returned. This 2002 Thunderbird is a very fast, modern car, but it definitely has a retro look that reminds people of a car from the 1950s.